Hello and welcome to Module 16 of our Small Business Certified AI Strategist program. In the past few modules, we've evaluated AI solutions with the MICE scoring and the robust scoring method, and we've created thorough value analyses, and we've finalized RFPs, and we've developed AI tool scorecards and AI tool descriptions. Now it's time to bring all of these elements together into a cohesive AI roadmap report. This is the strategic plan that spells out your implementation timelines, your budget allocations, your ROI targets, and your rollout cadences. So in this module, what we're going to cover is using the sample AI roadmap spreadsheet, specifically the Gantt chart tab. We'll review the prioritizing of tools by their MICE scores and their quantifiable impact, deciding which projects get developed first. We'll also put together the budget and resource allocation, where we're making sure that we have the funds and the personnel in place. And then we're going to review the ROI projections and sensitivity analysis, where we prep for the best and worst case outcomes. And then we'll review the rollout cadence, including why it's typically wise to release no more than one new tool per department per month, and how that might vary based on a business's tech maturity. This particular module is packed with information, so let's dive in. So when you're deploying multiple AI tools, each with its own set of complexities, you need a clear visual timeline. And the Gantt chart tab in your sample AI roadmap spreadsheet is really perfect for this. This is where we're going to leverage the MICE scores and the quantifiable impact section, where the high MICE scores, they indicate tools that are both impactful and relatively easy to implement. Often these are the best candidates for early rollout. And a very high financial ROI, that might prompt us to schedule the solution earlier, even if the MICE score is much higher. The next item in the AI roadmap spreadsheet is the release cadence. We want to keep in mind that we have a general rule that we release no more than one new tool per department per month, where some businesses, they might prefer one tool per department per quarter for a more conservative approach. So what you're going to need to gauge on a client by client basis is, do you want an aggressive one new tool per month per department, or do you want a more conservative approach? And the way that you can assess that is, if a business is tech friendly and used to rapid digital changes, and they're used to being early adopters, then a more aggressive roadmap can work well for those types of clients. If it's a lower tech client with limited digital processes in place, then you might want to start slower and avoid overwhelming your employees. Now, each tool inside of the AI tool description, we had a timeline that we were able to kind of brainstorm with ChatGPT or Claude, and we have some sort of idea of how long it's going to take to go from the development kickoff phase to the actual release phase. So knowing this information and knowing the MICE score and knowing the quantifiable impact, we should have a short list of the tools that we would like to implement in the next 12 months. Now, the next phase is we want to make sure that we set realistic milestones for each one of these AI tools. So as we're looking at the development of each of these tools, if there are things like we need data preparation, or we need to put together a pilot test launch, or we need to put it in beta mode before we release this in production, we need to include those facts as we are putting together our Gantt chart for the development phases. A lot of this will be taken care of when we put together the AI tool description. However, just be sure to fact check it at this point and add any buffer that's needed, so that way we can handle any unforeseen complexities like vendor delays or any compliance checks. So when we build out our Gantt chart, the most important things when it comes to the timeline is, do we have a development timeframe? And what is the development timeframe that we agreed to in the AI tool description? And that timeframe, we have a development kickoff date and a development delivery date. So we want to keep that in mind and record that in the spreadsheet. So we want to have our dev start date and our launch date. Now, when we keep in mind also our rule of no more than one new tool per department per quarter, we use those rules to build out our release dates. So typically, what you're going to find at this stage when you are planning this out is you might have an incredibly high MICE score for a particular initiative, but that initiative might take 3 months to build. So if it takes 3 months to build, you might want to reprioritize so we can deliver quick wins sooner. And the quickest wins are typically going to be found with the off-the-shelf tools. So if an organization has not built a GPT for their marketing department, that might be one initiative that you've already outlined. Go ahead and take that building of a GPT for the marketing department. And even if the MICE score is lower than the highest MICE score, go ahead and implement that first, because the turnaround time of implementation of something like that will be 30 days or less. So what you're going to do is move around the Gantt chart a little bit to make sure that you eventually have a regular cadence of releases. And I'm going to show you an example of how we can organize these in a more methodical fashion. But the goal here is just to set that release cadence and make sure you account for dev time plus some sort of buffer. Now, at this stage, a timeline is really only half the equation. You also need the budget and the staff or the engineering help to help execute it. So you also need to understand the project costs. And what we're talking about is the total cost of ownership. This includes any engineering costs. So if you're going to be working with a crew like Strata 52's engineering team, then you're going to have some sort of fee to engineer and build the solution. You might also have licensing fees. You might have ongoing infrastructure costs. So figure out what the total cost of ownership would be on a monthly basis for this solution. A tangential example, if you're using or identifying an off-the-shelf tool like ChatGPT, if you have 5 individuals that you're recommending start using ChatGPT in the marketing department at that $20 a month, that's $100 per month. So we want to understand that we have that new license fee that's rolled out for the year, starting the date that the tool is rolled out. So project costs are really important, and including those project costs broken down by AI engineering costs, the licensing fees, any infrastructure costs, and then finally, the cost for you to handle the implementation. That's also important. Now, these costs should be already included in the AI tool description. They're already included in the value analysis. You're just extracting that information and putting it in a more readily available spreadsheet format, so that way your client can digest this very quickly. Now, the next item to review is any staffing and training. You want to identify which teams like IT, finance, or compliance, and you'll want to see who needs to be involved in any staffing or training for each AI tool's rollout. If a solution demands any custom AI expertise, you might want to consider using an external data source or external data scientist who specialize in the build out of this tool. You want to consider also the individuals who have access to, let's say, the data lake to actually build out that tool, and how involved are they going to need to be in the process. So the budget for the training hours for these individuals, and if you do have to bring in any specialized consultants, you want to include that in your budgetary numbers, so that way it's transparent and there aren't any budgetary surprises. And then finally, we want to avoid any type of overload. We don't want to be too aggressive with our roadmap. Our goal is to deliver incremental value to our clients with the roadmap. So we want to enforce whatever that rule is that you establish. So if it's one new tool per department per month, then great, stick to that. If it's one new tool per department per quarter, then great, stick to that. The goal is to avoid overload, and you want to prioritize delivering value to that client the most efficient way possible. So if a high priority project threatens to overlap with others, and it could mean that everything else derails because you're focusing on this high priority project, then be sure to stagger the rollout of any other tools, or know that you have the option to hire additional support, so that way the tools can get released in the cadence that you had planned. Now, each AI tool should have its own clear ROI targets, like payback periods or projected percentage ROI that you have outlined in the value analysis for each AI tool. And because real world conditions vary be sure to run any type of sensitivity analysis. So in your budgets, you want to make sure that you outline any best case or worst case scenarios. So for example, a best case scenario is that the data is clean, the user adoption is high, and integrations run smoothly. This means that your payback period is going to be faster. Then you might have a worst case scenario where your employees are resistant to change, or the data is messy, or there are vendor issues, and those are items that can delay ROI. So be sure to plan for the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, and draft a conservative scenario where you have low adoption, minimal gains, and an aggressive scenario in mind where you have that rapid adoption and maximum gains. And be sure to be able to show each scenario and how it shifts your final metrics and timeline. But instead of showing a best case, base case, worst case scenario, what I recommend that you do is be sure to run through that exercise and then commit to one of those. Commit to the more realistic or the base case scenario, because the KPIs that you put in place and the payback periods that you put in place are going to be the payback periods that we commit to effectively, the ones that we're going to be measuring when we get hired for implementation. The tools with the highest MICE impact often deliver the quicker payback for the clients if they're implemented correctly. Be sure to include the expected ROI or payback window in the Gantt chart or the roadmap, because you want to be able to report on that later when we have actual tangible results. Now, I know I'm kind of belaboring this point, but not all businesses can handle this rapid fire rollout. Factors like tech maturity, digital readiness, and employee openness, they really play a role. So if you do have a client that is more of a low tech environment, they might prefer to roll out one new tool per quarter, not even per department, but per quarter. And they might focus on a thorough training and culture shift before introducing any more tools. Whereas tech-friendly organizations, they might have multiple rollouts in parallel, providing that they have the resource pool and the adoption readiness is strong. You want to assess the readiness based on any conversations that you've had up to that point, and you want to gauge how quickly employees will be able to adapt to new technology and use that gut feeling or that information to be able to propose a feasible AI roadmap for the organization. Because one of the biggest mistakes that we can make at this point is to get too aggressive, to sit here and say, okay, we're going to roll out 30 AI tools next year. We're going to transform your business. And sure, on paper, it might sound great, but if you have a team that is resistant to change, a team that only uses their computers for email every once in a while, then unless these tools are being implemented and they're running the business in the background, which is hardly the case, then you're going to run into difficulty and resistance for the entire year. You're going to start building resentment and bitterness towards the client, because although you have the perfect plan and you know you can change their business, the roadblock is going to be the client culture itself. And that is going to tarnish the relationship between you and the client. So what's important in this stage is to make sure that you develop a roadmap that is not just feasible, but is something that is actionable and impactful. Balancing that on a client by client basis is an art that you will learn over time. All right, so that's a wrap for Module 16, Roadmap Creation, where you learned how to use the Gantt chart in your sample AI roadmap spreadsheet to schedule each AI tool's rollout. You learned how to prioritize each one of the AI opportunities based on their MICE score and their quantifiable impact, where we end up targeting high impact, lower complexity tools first. You also learned how to manage budget and resources carefully to avoid any type of overload, applying the general rule of no more than one new tool per department per month. You also learned how to plan for a return on investment via a sensitivity analysis, ensuring that stakeholders know that there is a best case scenario, a base case scenario, and a worst case scenario for your planning. And then you also know that you want to tailor each one of your roadmap's aggressiveness to the business's tech maturity and readiness for change. Now, I did review a lot of information very quickly. So there is an additional video where we go over the shoulder and I show you how to build out this AI roadmap spreadsheet and prioritize each one of these opportunities, including adding columns like the ROI, the dev start date, the launch date, building out the Gantt charts, the budgets, and so on. So fret not, there is more information to come where you are going to be able to follow along and watch me while I build one of these. So next up is Module 17, where we're going to move on to roadmap delivery, where we learn how to present this plan to your client's leadership, where we secure final approval and we keep everyone aligned as the AI projects unfold. And until then, go ahead and practice with your Gantt charts, check your resource availability, and strategize the right place for rolling out your AI tools. And I'll see you soon.